While events are canceled for the foreseeable future, it is not the most ideal time, perhaps, to invest in new decks as there are not events to play your physical cards in. However, by no means does that make it a bad idea to invest in a budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck now, so that when events do start back up, you will be more than ready to compete. Of course, the format is always changing with new releases, meta shifts, and new ban lists. These decks, though, can be built and played in a competitive fashion for $100 or less and can steal games off of meta threats that come your way. Welcome to the top 5 budget decks for August 2020. To begin, I'd like to mention that these decks are not ranked in any particular order. Each of these decks has their merits within the current formats, and so with that being said, let's jump into the list. Starting off at number 1, we have Sky Striker. Sky Striker is in a very unique spot in terms of control of this format. While it may not be quite as consistent as some of the top decks, Sky Striker can grind with almost any deck at the top of the rankings. With board-breaking cards such as Sky Striker Maneuver's Afterburners and Sky Striker Maneuver Jamming Waves, that are not hard once per turns by the way, this deck can go second like nobody's business. When it comes to consistency, the deck has absolutely no problem with playing cards such as Pot of Desires, or maybe potentially even Pot of Avarice for the late game. In addition, this deck can utilize some very powerful floodgates. These includes cards like There Can Be Only One and Summon Limit, which can be absolute blowouts against combo decks across the board. What's truly unique about Sky Strikers, however, is the ability the deck has to utilize a crippling card such as Mystic Mine. If your opponent doesn't have a negation on its activation, Mystic Mine can absolutely blow your opponent out of the water. Once your Mystic Mine is established, you simply begin poking for direct damage with Hayate and juggling your Widow Anchors with Kagari. Overall, Sky Striker has a ton of potential for budget players, and it is a great place to get started if you're new to the scene. The second of these decks that I'm going to talk about today is going to be pure Necroz. Obviously, the Dogmatica cards push the deck past what I would consider the budget portion, or the budget version of the deck, which is around $100 to $110. But pure Necroz, now equipped with 3 Unicorn in their arsenal, isn't too bad of a pickup. With decks like Adamanticators in the format that absolutely rely on their extra deck monster effects popping off, locking them out of extra deck effects with Unicorn can pack a devastating punch to your opponent's deck. Not only that, but the deck is extremely consistent. With Brio searching your monsters and Colossalus searching your spells, the deck already had enough consistency. However, with the addition of the incantations, the deck's already high rate of consistency has now been boosted even higher. Plus, you have cards like Necroz Kaleidoscope that can send cards like Herald of the Arclight to the graveyard to summon your rituals, which in turn can then trigger and then grant you additional searches. Pure Necroz is definitely a sleeper deck in this format. The third deck that we gotta discuss is straight fire. Sorry, pardon the pun. Literally. Salad Boys are in the house yet again for another fiery format. While it has fallen slightly in popularity, the deck is still very consistent and can do some really cool things that help them keep up with the meta monstrosities that we see in the format today. Not only can Salamangreat set up their powerful trap cards in Salamangreat Rage and Roar, but they can also utilize cards like Salamangreat Foul and Parallel Exceed to summon Abyss Dweller, which can put a hurting on several meta decks this format. Additionally, the deck can play a ton of hand traps. The Salamangreat engine is so concise that the deck can play a massive amount of hand traps in slots that would otherwise be dedicated to engine cards in other decks. Also, because the deck is so cheap, there could be more room for you to invest in blowout cards like Access Code Talker to OTK your opponent all the way to the Shadow Realm. We are about halfway through the list, but we can't start to finish it off without mentioning the ultimate board breaker, our number 4 pick, Cyber Dragon. With the reprint of Cyber Emergency and Dual Overload, Cyber Dragon has become a lot more accessible for players on a budget. As previously mentioned, this deck can absolutely body any board your opponent builds. Cards like Rampage Dragon can push through absolutely anything in OTK no matter the board state. The addition of newer cards such as Chaos Dragon Levianeer helps the deck spin cards away from the opponent's hand and pop cards on the board to enable swift OTKs. While the deck isn't too adept at going first, it can set up hand loops utilizing Artifact Durandal and Droll and Lockbird. They can absolutely devastate the opponent's chances of winning before OTKing them the next turn. Cyber Dragons aren't the best deck, but they are for sure a sleeper deck that you should not take lightly. You might end up getting OTK'd out of nowhere. And finally, on to number 5. We have the deck that I personally would love to mention in this category. My personal favorite deck of the moment, Zodiac. I love this deck. The one-card combos. Zoo has the consistency and the power to push you through even the top decks in the meta. Being able to play as many hand traps as you wish because your engine is so concise has its benefits. Because the engine is so concise, you can customize your zoo list to match your playstyle. Like floodgates? Play them. Want more hand traps? Throw them in. You've got the room. Not only is this deck consistent, but it is also resilient. While Zodiac Trident is limited, you have several tools at your disposal to get back everyone's favorite mommy back into play. From Chalkanine to Zodiac Combo to Pot of Avarice to Megaclops, Trident never truly leaves you. And speaking of Megaclops, that card is absolutely absurd. From being able to reborn your Trident with a material that your opponent controls every single turn, to just being unaffected by everything except XYZ monsters, that card is absolutely credible and gives the deck another boss monster outside of Trident that can win games on its own. Additionally, if Trident were to come to multiple copies at some point in the future, the deck's grind game just increases that much more. Imagine having 2 Trident on the field and popping 2 cards each turn, all backed up by hand traps and back row. All in all, these decks are sure to give you a bang for your buck if you intend on risking your life to go back to locals. Each of them have applications within the meta that can help you compete on a budget of around $100. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. What budget decks are you looking to play this format? Any ones that I missed? There are a couple that I wanted to mention like Dinosaurs, but the Extravagance version sadly eclipses the $100 price point, so I kind of had to leave it off the list. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day. It's me, it's that DMD, and your mans is out.